wait, he's alive. He's alive. Yeah, wait, look.
The king.
Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Yahweh.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom. Last minute late night study. I'm not going to lie, I was on the fence on whether or not I was going to do the show tonight. It was between tonight or tomorrow night, but my wife got that bomb image. Did you guys see the image for the thumbnail for this show? How cool is that? Anybody confused by some of the stuff that's in there? Is everybody familiar with tonight's study? Okay, so you guys need to try to keep me on track tonight. The live chat. As you all know, for those of you who have watched me often enough, I can get real wordy and go down rabbit trails, and we are starting late tonight. And we're going to try to get through 3 more chapters of 1 Samuel. So I'm going to ask that you guys try to keep me on track. Otherwise, we're going to be here till like 1 in the morning, and I'm not trying to do that. Okay, so let's dive right into it. Okay, so 1 Samuel chapter 4. All right, so the word of Samuel came to all of Israel. Now Israel went out against the Philistines to battle and pitched beside Ebenezer, and the Philistines pitched in Aphek. And the Philistines put themselves in array against Israel, and when they joined battle, Israel was smitten before the Philistines, and they slew of the army in the field about 4,000 men, 4,000 down in Israel at this point. When the people were come into the camp, the elders of Israel said, "Wherefore hath Jehovah smitten us today before the Philistines? Let us fetch the ark of the covenant of Jehovah out of Shiloh unto us, that when it comes among us, it may save us out of the hand of the enemies." Okay, we're going to pause there real quick. So first, I want to point out how interesting is it, and we see this not just with the Israelites, right? A lot of ancient cultures, not so much today. You see the credit goes to the spiritual realm, right? They're not saying, "Why are we being beaten by the Philistines?" They're saying, "Wherefore hath Jehovah smitten us today?" None of the blame is on who the armies are, how many people are involved, what kind of weaponry, the weather, any kind of indication, any kind of factor that would normally be argued in modern times is not being considered right now. And I think that's interesting. Okay, so let us fetch the Ark of the Covenant and then see how it's out of Shiloh there in verse 3. If you remember if you watched the last video, that's where Samuel would have been, is in Shiloh. Let us fetch the Ark of the Covenant of Jehovah. When it comes among us, it may save us out of the hands of the enemies. This is why I've done studies on this before. This is idolatry of the ark, you guys. Look what they're saying. Let us fetch the Ark of the Covenant, not let us seek the Father. Let's ask him what we should do, right? They're not being commanded to bring the Ark out. They're making that assumption. And then they go on to say, when it comes among us, talking about the Ark, it may save us out of the hands of our enemies. Have you all caught this before? This is idolatry of the Ark. They saw the Ark as a symbol of the representation, right, of the presence of Yah. And that in and of itself isn't necessarily idolatry. But when you worship that which is supposed to be representing rather than who it's representing, this is ark idolatry. Something I don't see discussed very often at all. Is this new for any of you? Ark idolatry here in 1 Samuel 4. When it comes among us, it may save us. So right away, this beckons for us to, as the readers, not only put ourselves in the mind state of the elders and of the Israelites. Okay, we lost 4,000 men. We need to figure this out. We got to fix the situation. But also look at the desperation there and then apply it to our walks. When we have those moments where we're like, whoa, something's going wrong. Apparently Yah's upset with me, my household, my congregation, whatever. What is your first go-to? Is it to go seek the Father, or is it to try to automatically have a solution that makes sense to you. Oh, he must want us to do this. In times past, we did this and it worked out. Therefore, this is what we need to do. A plus B equals C mentality, right? This is something we've talked about in videos many times in this series, even about, making that, what worked in the past must work now. That is not seeking the Father now for now. So these are things that I think this is bigger picture of what we need to be thinking about in this study. When are you in your walk in a moment of desperation? What is your version of the Ark of the Covenant in this situation? What is your first go-to bring out? Thinking that it represents the presence of Yah. Well, if I proclaim this in faith, he will honor it. It represents him. Instead of seeking him on what to be doing. Right? There's so many different examples we could plug in here for whoever you are and your walk and where you're at, whether you're looking at the past or right now. Ark idolatry. This is something that is just not preached about enough, in my opinion. So the people sent to Shiloh that they may bring forth the Ark of the Covenant of Yahovah, the Elohim of hosts, right, which dwells between the cherubims, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, which we talked about last video, right? And they were there with the Ark of the Covenant of Elohim, of God. And when the Ark of the Covenant of Yahovah came into the camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout so that the earth rang again, right? And you can look at that rang, depending on what version you have. It's talking about like a shaking of the ground, the vibration from sound. I don't know about you guys, but we used to see, when I was in the military, we used to call AK-47s thunder, because when somebody would shoot an AK-47, you could literally feel it in the ground if you were close enough by. Same with like machine guns and heavy guns, right? You can feel it shaking in the ground. So we're talking thousands, tens of thousands shouting, and feeling it in the ground. That's the visual. Look, they're so excited. The text doesn't say that Yah warned them. He didn't try to stop them. He allowed this to happen. It was already in their hearts. Consequence was already coming their way because of what was already in their hearts before the situation. And we're just seeing the indications here. Obviously, their hearts were in alignment because their first go-to is go get the ark. It will save us. They probably didn't even realize as it came out of their mouths what they were saying, how their words indicate where their heart's at in that situation, that it may save us. And when the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, "What means the noise of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews?" And they understood that the ark of Yahovah was come into the camp. And the Philistines were afraid, for they said, "God has come into the camp." And they said, "Woe to us, for there hath not been such a thing heretofore." They've never seen this happen before. Woe unto us, who shall deliver us out of the hands of these mighty gods, these mighty Elohim? These are the Elohim that smote the Egyptians with all the plagues in the wilderness. There's going to be a few callbacks to the Exodus in this video, which is funny because we just got done talking about Exodus. For anybody who's not familiar, we just got done with a very long, extensive study on the first 14 chapters of Exodus, something like 27 hours. Jeff and I went through every detail we felt led to throw at it, and it was quite a lot. So look, they're already calling back to the Elohim, the God of Israel, of the Hebrews, being the God that their remembrance, their connection, what they connect it to, right, is what happened in Egypt. So of course they're freaking out. I just think that's funny because we see that, and we talked about that in the Exodus videos about how often you see in Scripture, all throughout Scripture, Yah reminding his people, saying, I took you out of Egypt. I took your fathers out of Egypt. And this could have been generations later. And he was still trying to emphasize that point there. This was where he really made a point with his name for the nation of Israel. And to us today, all throughout the Bible, we even see it at the very end, talking about references to what he did in Egypt in the Exodus. The God that smote the Egyptians with all the plagues in the wilderness. Keep that in mind in the back of your head as we're doing the study, because there's going to be some connections here. Be strong and quit yourselves like men, O ye Philistines, that ye be not be servants unto the Hebrews as they have been to you. Quit yourselves like men and fight. So they got their little mantra, their little motto there. And they try to gather their wits amongst them. And the Philistines fought, and Israel was smitten again. And they fled every man into his tent, and there was a very great slaughter, for there fell of Israel 30,000. We went from 4,000 to 30 after bringing their idol out. And the Ark of the Covenant itself wasn't an idol, but it can become an idol, much like ministry, marriage, your household, your view of yourself, your money, your job, whatever it is. Anything can become an idol, even that which is of God, even the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the God was taken, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were slain. Okay, so we got to pause there. I don't remember. I didn't prepare for this study anywhere near like I did for Exodus, but I didn't prepare for tonight's video, just like I didn't prepare much for last week's video either. But I do remember reading, I can't remember if it was the Targums. It's extra biblical, it's not scripture. But there are accounts that seem to point to Goliath having been the one who stole the ark. Anybody in the live chat heard that before? So when I first came across that study in, I think, 2017, 2018, somewhere in there, I was studying a lot of fringe stuff. So the first question was, is there anything in scripture that proves that this most definitely can't be true? So you're looking at timelines, you're looking at the timing of Goliath and the Philistines and things like that, and the timing of this early on in 1 Samuel. And I couldn't find any scripture that proved that it did happen, but time-wise, it would make a lot of sense. It would make a lot of sense. And we're going to see later on in 1 Samuel that we see that Goliath was fighting as a younger giant, not just as an adult giant. He'd been fighting his whole life. So even if he had been younger here, which I don't think he was as young as you might think, he would have been fighting. He very easily could have been present. And there's a call back to this later, again, into the middle of Samuel, that we see Goliath having courage to do certain things and to defy the God of Israel, to defy the Israelites, defy the honor and glory of the God of Israel. How much more likely would he feel confident in doing that if he had already been successful in stealing the ark? So I think this is one of those little sections that most people don't realize, but I'm not saying it's for sure, but if it is accurate, and I think it is, we can see that carry throughout 1 Samuel. Because Goliath had a lot of courage to defy the God of Israel halfway through this book, right? Am I going to be doing a show with Vicky soon? Vicky, Joy, and I are planning on doing chapter 17, and we might do 16 and 17 together, or just 17 or whatever. We are planning on doing that together. We did our studies on that, I don't know, a year or two ago. We had done the study together, compared notes. It's an amazing study. And now that I'm going through 1 Samuel, I'm going to bring her in for that chapter. So I've already talked to her about it, and as long as she's not too busy with certain things, she's agreed to do it. So I look forward to that. Okay, so I just wanted to throw that out there, that Goliath might have been the one to have physically grabbed the ark. It would make sense that he'd be able to. I swear, guys, I swore I don't know if it was just an image in your mind. You ever see images in your mind, and then you go looking for that thumbnail art and you can't find it, or you go looking for that, you think it's a painting or drawing or whatever? I swore there was this really cool image of a giant that looked like the giant of Kandahar from Afghanistan that Quayle and Marzulli covered. If you guys aren't familiar with that, that's a really cool bunny trail to go down. Modern day giant killed by U.S. troops in Afghanistan not that many years ago. Anyways, I swore there was this image of a giant that looked like him jumping over the Philistine army and over the Israelite army, grabbing the ark, right? And so I spent, I don't know, like an hour today looking for that image because I thought it was so cool. And I was like, man, I keep getting it in my head. So then I end up sending my wife a bunch of different images. And I was like, I want to get a giant holding the ark. I could not find one piece of art, copyright or otherwise, of a giant holding the ark. So we had to make it. But okay, so I wanted to put that in your minds, that quite possibly Goliath stole the Ark of the Covenant. He would physically be able to do it by himself. Keep in mind, the Ark of the Covenant was typically carried by multiple individuals, right? Not one. So for it to be stolen in the middle of a battle and then carried away, I mean, this thing would not have been light, right? I didn't study out the weight estimations and things like that. I'm sure that can be done real easily for anybody who wants to do that. But I can't help but think that this would not be an easy task, but it would be for a giant who could pick it up, put it on his shoulder, grab it up, and take off with it. In the last video, last week, we talked about the 2 sons of Eli were going to die on the same day. This was part of the prophecy, the word that Yah had given Samuel when he was a young boy in the temple. Wouldn't he have died touching it? That's an awesome question. But here's the thing. If you're asking if he would have died touching it because of being unclean, then, I mean, we have to come up with all kinds of theories and speculation as to how they would have stolen the ark without touching it. Because the Philistines in general were unclean. So giant or otherwise, you're talking unclean individuals being able to grab the ark and take off with it. I would say that Yah was allowing this to happen because of the idolatry of the ark and some issues of some things that Israel had been struggling with before this point. This was all consequences that were coming forward. You got to keep in mind, Scripture talks about consequences of Yah being after the fact. It's not always immediate. And because of that, a lot of times people won't repent. He gives them that chance to repent and they don't. So this is something that was in the works long before this battle, in my opinion. I would not say that all the Philistines were giants. I would not say that at all. I would say that they had giants, though. We knew that for sure. But based on my studies on the skeletal remains and things like that, you know, a lot of the tribes that had giants, they weren't a tribe of giants. There's only a few tribes that seem to be mostly giants, and these are your ancient, your Zuzims, Emims, things like that. You get to the Philistines, you know, and you start studying on their connections to the island of Crete and stuff like that. You're not talking about all of them. Yeah, Goliath was a champion, not just because he was tall. Yeah, we'll end up going into that later on in this study, not tonight, but when Vicky and Joy and I go over it. But yeah, it is worth stating that giants in the Bible, when you're talking about Goliath or Og of Bashan, or you look at the Amorites and the Horites and all these others, these weren't just tall individuals. We actually have skeletal proof that they had a 3-to-2 bone density ratio. Okay, so when you look at a normal human's body stature, it is a 3-to-1 when you're looking at width versus, you know, length and the different proportions. It's a 3-to-1, not a 3-to-2. But the bone density of these skeletal remains show that these individuals were not just tall, but big. Skiba did an awesome job explaining this. There's a couple other guys that did a really good job. They even did some studies on the caloric intake for some of these guys. And, you know, Yah willing, Jeff and I will do some giant videos later, because we have all kinds of information to throw at you guys about patterns in their burials and all kinds of studies that we've done on those things, and the skeletal remains and the varying heights and the times from the various heights, and how far back can we go? How much forward can we go? Are there some today? These are all things that we can definitely touch on. But yeah, it is worth stating that these individuals are not just tall. This is not Shaquille O'Neal. And see, these giants were descendants of fallen angels having mated with women, humans. So it is not a complete human. We're talking a different DNA altogether. It is a you know, when you look at like 1 Corinthians 15, it's talking about the different bodies for the different types of spirits, the different types of nefesh, the different souls. This would be a whole different type of spirit, therefore a whole different type of body. Whole neat study, but we're not going to get into that tonight. I'm not going to try to do rabbit trails right now. But there is a lot to be said about that. Yeah, Shabbat Shalom, MB. I got your messages. We're going to discuss your giveaway items and stuff like that. And Mrs. Vader, we're going to need a address from you if you'd like to receive your free shirt. Speaking of, real quick, for anybody who is curious, because all the giveaway winners are going to get a shirt option if they want a shirt. So this is one of the shirts we have, right? See if you can, it's kind of wrinkly. This is not the one I'll give away. This is mine. I have ones that have not been worn, right? So you have that one. You've got the Draw Nigh. You've got the Faith is Dead Without Works, right? It's in a casket. And then you've got the Jonah and the Ketos. All right. I told some of the winners that I would do this, and I forgot. So there they are. Okay, back to the study. Okay, so the two sons of Eli that were prophesied to die in one day as a sign to Eli that we talked about in last week's video died in this battle. And they would have only been present because of the bringing of the ark. So maybe they died as the ark was being stolen. Maybe that was part of how it was stolen. They had to be slain for it to be grabbed, right? And there ran a man of Benjamin out of the army and came to Shiloh the same day with his clothes rent, earth upon his head. Mourning, right? These are signs of biblical mourning. They tear the hair, they tear the clothes, they throw dust on their head. This was all part of the mourning, what it would look like. And when he came, Eli sat upon a seat by the wayside watching, right? Kind of reminds me, I don't know how familiar you guys are with like ancient battle scenes and stuff, but even not so ancient, if you go back to like 1800s, right? I used to do a lot of Scottish history studies. People would sit on the sidelines of the battle during the battle so that they could watch to see if their loved ones got hurt, and they would go onto the battlefield and grab them if they were dying or wounded and pull them off to the side. So Eli's got a situation here where he's sitting by the wayside, and it also has that kind of vibe of an elder by the gates, which we've talked about in other videos before as to why that's important. For his heart trembled for the ark of God. And when the man came into the city and told it, all the city cried out. When Eli heard the noise of the crying, he said, "What means the noise of this tumult?" And the man came in hastily and told Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were dim, that he could not see. And the man said unto Eli, "I am he that came out of the army. I fled today out of the army." And he said, What is there done, my son? And the messenger answered and said, "Israel's fled before the Philistines. There hath been a great slaughter among the people, and your two sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God is taken." And it came to pass when he mentioned the ark of God that he fell from off the seat backward by the side of the gate. See, there's that gate side, like an elder. And his neck broke, and he died, for he was an old man and heavy, and judged Israel 40 years. Why am I emphasizing heavy? This is not a body shaming comment that I'm making here. Last week's video, there was in the discussion between Yah and Eli, and the message that was given to Eli through the two witnesses, right? The first, the man of God that we're not given the name of, and the second one being Samuel. There's talk of the two sons of Eli not being stopped, even though Eli knew what was going on, and that he was being made fat by the portions that were being taken in an un-Torah manner by his two sons, the priests, right? So I don't know. For those who watched last week's video, you know what I'm talking about. And I said, look, see how it says he was fat? That's a physical and a spiritual reference there. Being fat on the offerings was talking about, you're gaining from others' lack, from their loss. And that is not a godly thing. That is the spiritual. And it's being represented in the physical, but you're also literally getting fat as a mirroring of the spiritual. So I thought that was kind of neat. But, it's funny because if you look up images of Eli on the chair dying, right? If you look up Google or Bing images or whatever, I've yet to see any of them that do not show a skinny old guy. It says he was heavy. We're told he was heavy twice. And I mean, it's not super important, but the scripture is telling us why. It shows that he was comfortable. Oh, Kathy is doing some cooking. Oh, yeah. So since so many of the giveaway people are in live chat tonight, we didn't get them out this week, but we are planning on getting them out next week as early on as possible. I'm sorry it's been taking so long. And his daughter-in-law, Phinehas' wife, was with child, near to be delivered. And when she heard the tidings that the ark of God was taken, that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed herself and travailed, for her pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the woman that stood by her said, "Fear not, for you have borne a son." But she answered not, neither did she regard it. She didn't care. This is, I don't like using this example, but this is like a 9/11 situation for that time period for Israel, the Ark of God being stolen. This is representative. You see, when they lost the 4,000 men, they gave credit to Yah. They're saying Yah did this, not the Philistines. So now that the ark is being taken, it's that pit of your stomach, your heart drops, sinking feeling of, oh, what represented the presence of God dwelling amongst us has been stolen. He allowed that to happen. What is that symbolizing? You see, their hearts are melting with fear. Where do we send the addresses? You can send it to me on Instagram if that's easier for you, Mrs. Vader, because I don't think you have me on Facebook. And she named the child Ichabod, saying, "The glory is departed from Israel, because the ark of God was taken, because of her father-in-law and her husband." Right? But it was mostly about the ark. You see, it was when she heard about the ark, just like when Eli heard about the ark. That was the trembling moment. That's, And she said, "The glory is departed from Israel, for the ark of God is taken." So look at the order that we're being given the information. The glory is departed from Israel because the ark was taken, because her father-in-law and her husband, right? The emphasis is on the ark. And then they re-emphasize the very next verse. She said, "The glory is departed from Israel, for the ark of God is taken." It's kind of depressing, though, to name your child based on that moment, It says about the time of her death in verse 20. Yes, so she dies as well. Yes. Yeah, she dies as she's giving birth. Like she gives birth, the child comes out, the midwife, the doula, however, her helper, and it's like, "Oh, you were born a son. Don't fear. There's inheritance. Your family will go forward." But at this point, for the reader, we get to sit there and go, "Yeah, but Eli was told through two witnesses that no man will gain of age in that household, and that he's taking away the position of priest from that house and giving it to one who is more worthy," which is Samuel. And I think Eli caught on to that being Samuel when he heard about it. And then especially when Samuel was the one to give him the message. Just catch up on live chat real quick. Half an hour and we're done with the first chapter. We're doing good, right? Kathy, what are you making? Are you done cooking? Dehydrating citrus peels, canning bone broth, making skin cream. Oh man, these things are all over the place. I'm assuming you're not putting all those together. Yeah. Rachel dies giving birth. There's a few situations in scripture where we see some people dying giving birth. Okay, on to chapter 5, the Philistines and the ark. So Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. When the Philistines took the ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon, and they set it by Dagon. This would have been their main deity, often represented as a fish god, which is interesting that we brought up the Catholic shirt, because that was the whole point of this shirt, is connecting the priest of ancient Dagon fish worship with the bishops and the popes here. I think that was one of the popes. Was it John Paul II or something like that? Yes, Kathy has a giveaway. I've already discussed with her on what she's getting, I believe. I think I've got everybody down except for MB on what they're getting. And I think I've gotten addresses from just about everybody. I got to go over shirt options, and that's about it. Okay, so when they of Ashdod, wait, what was that? Ichabod. I get it now. Ichabod. Yeah. And when they of Ashdod arose early on the morrow, behold, Dagon was fallen upon his face to the earth before the ark of Yahovah. And they took Dagon and set him in the place again. So if anybody didn't catch it, that was actually the background that my wife made blurry for the thumbnail. That was one of the arts that we found that had the Ark of the Covenant, and that big thing that had fallen next to it, the head and the hands are off. That's the statue of Dagon. Notice it's early in the morning. It's funny how they, based on their belief system, there is no issue with bringing in new deities into their house of worship. You find that funny? Because it seems like with Yah, he's the only one that tells us not to do that. But you look at all the other faith systems, you look at the RCC and some of the churches of today, and they've done that as well, right? Vicky Joy is here. What have you missed? You've basically missed people asking when you're going to be on the show. I'm not even kidding. That was actually brought up. Vicky Joy. Vicky Joy is much loved here. Yes, Shabbat Shalom to all who are observing Shabbat, and even to those who are not. And Shalom Shalom to all listening in. Okay, so they put the Ark of the Covenant in their house of worship for Dagon. Like it's a treasure that they're bringing forth. Maybe they're adding to the deities, or maybe it's just a treasure. Where do you put something treasured? That you've spoils of war that have a lot of significance. Oh, put it in the temple. That's where the special stuff goes, right? Not expecting that the next morning that the head of Dagon and both the palms of his hands were cut off upon the threshold, and only the stump of Dagon was left. Right, which is really funny because we have scripture that talks about idols really just being transformed stumps. Right? They talk about how how do you cut a third of the tree and use it to heat up your food and this, that, and the other, and then the last third, the remaining the stump, you turn into an idol and you worship it as if you weren't the one that used it to do things. It's doing nothing for you. Yes, Vicky Joy. Seriously, that was one of the first things that was commented if you scroll all the way up. But look at that. So it's on the morning when they rose early on the next morning. Dagon was fallen upon his face to the ground, like bowing, right, submitting, and the head and the hands, thoughts and actions, head and hands, speaking and doing, head and hands, and it says we're cut off. So as to say, if you look at the terminology there, it doesn't seem like this is just simply broken off from falling. It looks like it's been cut off by like an entity, like an angel with a sword. Maybe the same angel, messenger, that Balaam's donkey saw. Maybe with a flaming sword. And it was upon the threshold. For those of you who've watched the Exodus study fully, or at least the last 2-3 videos, then you know what I'm getting at there, right? The threshold referencing, showing the aperture, that the entrance or exit, the beginning of moving from one room to another, physically as well as spiritually. But also, this is where a covenant is made. You go over the threshold in covenant, or you tread on the threshold if you spit on the covenant, right? So it's destroyed at the threshold, because Yah is not in covenant with the false deities, with the false gods. Therefore, neither the priests of Dagon nor any that come into Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon and Ashdod unto this day. They won't tread on. Look at the terminology there, you guys. Who here went through the threshold part of our Exodus study? And when I remember reading this years ago, thinking, they feared going in, but look at this: tread on the threshold. They refuse to tread on the threshold now that covenant has been not established between Yah and the false deities. Now that Yah's presence had been made known there, now they don't tread on the threshold. But the hand of Yahovah was heavy upon them of Ashdod, and he destroyed them and smote them with emerods, even Ashdod and the coast thereof. Okay, so anybody who's not familiar with this study, if you looked at that word emerods, right? I've seen some people and other versions say hemorrhoids and things like that, right? We'll get into it in a minute here, but you might want to start thinking bubonic plague. You might also want to start comparing to the boils in the book of Exodus with the Egyptians. In the same context as treading down false gods as well, just like in Egypt. Yep, yeah, that was one of the things I was going to get to in a minute here. Talk at length about the threshold covenants, my sleep paralysis book. Yeah, that is outstanding. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, there are some question marks. We see that since it's threshold of a house and not temple and thing like that, it's there's reason to believe that it's personal covenants, right? Whether it's within the house or with neighbors or whatever, it's personal rather than temple. Not that the Israelites would have had a temple in Exodus or in Egypt, rather. A sodomy punishment. Well, first off, I wouldn't call these hemorrhoids. I'd say others call them hemorrhoids. Depending on what version you have, it might say hemorrhoid. If you do Google and Bing searches, they might place the word hemorrhoid there. You're getting the image of like a boil. You're getting like a tumor image, right? It's got a, it's got protrusion. It's uncomfortable. It's pain. But unlike hemorrhoids, we're looking at multiple parts of the body. Again, like I said before, think bubonic plague. And if you're not familiar with bubonic plague, and yes, the mention of mice. Yeah, I mentioned that, and I was getting to that, but yes, bubonic plague. That's one of the reasons why I was getting there with that. But for anybody who's not familiar with the bubonic plague, right, which is often connected to beliefs on the Black Death, right? It's a plague that's caused by bacteria. And usually within 10 days of not being treated, you can die from it, but it causes fever and headache and vomiting. But the most common symptom would be swollen, painful lymph nodes, right? And this can happen throughout the whole body. And they can break open, like the boils in Exodus, again. So like I said, I'm thinking bubonic plague, but I'm also connecting it, comparing it to the plagues in Exodus. Yah doing his things his way. I would not be surprised if it was the exact same plague. Yeah, and these are typically spread. Modern science understands it to have been typically spread through the infection of fleas from animals, right? Rabbits, bunnies, cats, things like that. Mice, which is going to come up for anybody who's not familiar in this study here. But yeah, we're going to be thinking, you want to think tumor-like, you want to think swollen throughout the body, head to toe type of situation. And it can break open. It can pus out and stuff like that. It can have fluids and blood and all kinds of nasty, uncomfortable, gross, nasty stuff. And yeah, if it's not treated, it can be deadly. A lot of people believe that it was the cause of the Black Death that went through Asia and Europe and Africa and stuff like that. Okay, back to the study. So yeah, King James says emerods. Your version, if you read a different version, might have a different word there, but that's the image we're getting here, okay? So in Ashdod, they're getting smote with those. That's the plague. And so when the men of Ashdod saw that, they said the ark of the God of Israel shouldn't stay with us, for his hand is sore upon us. They gave credit to Yah too, and upon Dagon our God. They sent therefore and gathered all the lords of the Philistines unto them, and said, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? They said, let the ark of the God of Israel be carried to Gath. And they carried the ark of God of Israel to Gath. And it was so that after they had carried about, the hand of Yahovah was against that city with a great destruction. And he smote the men of the city, both small and great, and they had emerods in their secret parts. Again, I would not suggest the word hemorrhoids here. But interestingly enough, the Greek word for bubonic means groin. So are we talking the exact same plague? Yeah, it says emerods in their secret parts, in the places you least want them to be, right? Therefore they sent the ark of God to Ekron. And it came to pass, as the ark of God came to Ekron, the Ekronites cried out, saying, no, They've brought about the ark of God of Israel to us to slay us and our people. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines, right? Because there was 5 cities. Send away the ark of the God of Israel and let it go again to its place, that it slay us not and our people, for there was deadly destruction throughout all the city, and the hand of Yah, the hand of Elohim, was very heavy there. And the men that died not were smitten with emerods. Again, thinking Exodus, thinking Revelation, thinking bubonic plague, thinking plagues and wrath and judgment in general of how Yah does his thing. Just catching up the live chat here real quick. Okay. Anyways. Okay, so chapter 6, because we're going to tie some things in here. Well, the word men can mean both genders typically, Patricia. It doesn't always mean just men. We can see that with like verses, like even with tzitzis and stuff like that. It'll say the men, but it's not just talking about men, right? When you're looking at men, you're looking at sometimes mankind, not just men. Yeah, so it can mean person. Anyhow, and the ark of Yahovah was in the country of the Philistines 7 months. Interesting, that number of perfection. And the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners, right? Just like Nebuchadnezzar and other videos that we've done in this series where we show the kings, the leaders. What do? They get their magicians, but they're spiritual advisors. It's just like Exodus, right? It's funny how often the leaders back then would go to their spiritual advisors. That was their cabinet. That was their council. Those were the ones that were supposed to have the answers for the weird, the wacky, the crazy. Those were the ones that you wanted to ask. Should we go to battle? Should we not go to battle? And they said, if you send away the ark of the Elohim of Israel, send it not empty, but in any way wise, return him a trespass offering. Then shall you be healed, and it shall be known to you why his hand is not removed from you. Then they said, what should the trespass offering be? They said 5 golden emerods, so five pieces of gold to represent the plague. Those ouchies, as my daughter would say, that were all over their body. Those bubonic-looking, tumorous, pussy, pulsating, painful, some of them in the last place you'd want them to be. 5 golden emerods, 5 golden tumors, whatever you want to call them, and 5 golden mice, according to the number of the lords of the Philistines. For 1 plague was on you all and on your lords. Okay, so here's the thing, right? You have that connection of the mice with the carrier of this plague, possibly, and I do think that that's quite possible. So I do think that there was mice running rampant, that Yah was using creation to affect, much like we see with Exodus. He was making using animals as part of the plague, right? But I think more importantly, these mice represented the actual kings, because there was 5 cities, so there was 5 leaders, 5 Philistine tribal leaders, 5 kings. So I think the 5 golden emeralds were representing the plague, and the 5 mice were representing the 5 lords, showing, in nature what they are like. They're like mice. And, keep in mind, mice are unclean. They cause disease, right? It shows a lack of significance in big picture broad, right? This is Yah's view. They're nodding to, okay, yes, we are like mice compared to you. Wherefore shall you make images of your emerods and the images of your mice that mar the land? Look at that. And you shall give glory unto the Elohim of Israel, right? See, the mice that mar the land. Years ago, I would have thought, oh, it's just representing the filth of their nation. But I truly believe that this was a bubonic plague situation, that the mice were a part of that. And you shall give glory to the Elohim of Israel. Peradventure he'll lighten his hand from off of you, and from off your gods, and from off your land. Wherefore then do you harden your hearts, as the Egyptians and the Pharaoh hardened their hearts? Yes, there was. Okay, so what is that? Genesis 14 that you're making a reference to, MB? Altogether, those are 9 kings, because it was a war of 5 versus 4. That's actually a really fun study, Genesis 14, because you look at all those tribes, and those were the tribes that had giants. You want to talk about any chapter in the Bible looking like Lord of the Rings? It's Genesis 14. But anyways, okay. When he had wrought wonderfully among them, did they not let the people go, and they departed? Look, see, they're seeing that there's judgment on the people as well as the deities, as in Exodus, that there was the judgment on the people and the deities. So they're saying, look, we've seen this pattern before. If you let them go, if you let the ark go, you let your captivity go, does his hand not depart from you? Now therefore make a new cart. So they had it on an old cart, right? And take 2 kine on which there had come no yoke, right? And it's funny how Yah's leading them in how to go about this. Because when you look at this is actually the manner that would be completely what he would want of a Gentile nation. Two kind that have never bared a yoke. When you look at for the tamim, the perfection, like the red heifer, it had to be in one that did no work, has not toiled any, right? So this is a representation of holiness, of perfection, of not being injured, have not being the value has not been taken away, right? Tie the kine to the cart and bring their calves home from them. Take the ark of Yahovah and lay it upon the cart. Put the jewels of gold, right? The emeralds and the mice, which you return to him for a trespass offering, in a coffer by the side thereof, not inside. Okay. See, a lot of I've seen this in your Sunday school books and things like this. They would show it inside. They did not put it inside. They put it alongside. See, and it's funny because you see Yah is directing their movement. They asked their priests and diviners, who were Dagon worshipers and followed other deities and weird things, right? And Yah used them to tell them what to do because they truly wanted to be done with the situation. And this wasn't just about judgment on the Philistines and the enemy of Israel. This is also about judgment of Israel. So you have the ark being taken away. Yah says, that's of me. And when it comes back, it will be of me. It's not of you. I am the one. If you want to bring it out, you ask me if I want it out, not what you think it will do. This is not, Yah is not a jack in the box God where you crank it. Well, we brought the ark out. Dun, 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 dun. Now he has to honor it. You know, people I see all too often, even in probably more frustrating in books and in sermons and things, where people treat their prayers and how they preach and teach about God like a jack-in-the-box God. Well, if we say the right things, if we proclaim the right things, we declare the right things, whatever, he must honor it. The treasure's already in that treasure chest. No room for golden gems. Yeah. So they put it in the coffer by the side, alongside, and send it away that it may go. And so look, they're testing now. And if it goes up by the way of his own coast to Beth Shemesh, then God, Yah, has done this great evil. But if not, then we shall know that it's not by Yah's hand. It wasn't by the God of Israel that he smote us. It was by chance. So they're testing it, right? Notice how it said go up by the way. Keep that in mind, okay? And the men did so, and they took the 2 kine, tied them to the cart, shut up their calves at home, right? They laid the ark of Yahovah upon the cart and the coffer with the mice of gold and the images of their emeralds. And the kine took straight way to the way of Beth Shemesh and went along the highway, okay? If you look at that word highway in the Hebrew, we are indicating going upward, okay? There's a couple reasons why I'm bringing this up. First off, it shows all the more Yah's hand on the situation, because the cattle are not going to, of their own accord, of their own flesh, want to go up when they can go straight or down, right? Look, it says went along the highway, right? If you look at that area when you're looking at leaving Ekron towards Beth Shemesh, it would have been an upward travel, but there were other roads that went in different directions that would have been straight and downward. Lowing as they went, turned not aside to the right hand or the left, and the lords of the Philistines went after them unto the border of Beth Shemesh. They really wanted to see for sure. They kept thinking, well, maybe it'll pull off to the side. I think they really did hope that it wasn't of Yah, because then that shows all the more the reason to fear the God of Israel, right? And they of Beth Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest, timing clue, in the valley, and they lifted up their eyes and saw the ark and rejoiced to see it. Okay, so they were reaping the harvest in the valley, lifted up their eyes and saw it, right? Because it's coming up and then over, right? And the cart came into the field of Joshua, a Beth Shemite, and stood there, where there was a great stone, you guys. Anybody familiar with that great stone? And they clave the wood of the cart and offered the kind of burnt offering unto Yahovah. See, again, remember they had no work and everything like that? Tamim, perfection. Mm-hmm. And the Levites took down the ark of Yahovah and the coffer that was with it, wherein the jewels of gold were, and put them on the great stone. And the men of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrifices the same day unto Yahovah. And when the 5 lords of Philistine had seen it, they returned to Ekron the same day, probably with their heads down, right? With their mouse tails between their legs. And these are the golden emeralds which the Philistines returned for a trespass offering unto Yahovah. For Ashdod, Gaza, Askelon, Gath, and Ekron. Those are the 5 cities, right? The 5 strongholds, the 5 dominions of the Philistines. And the golden mice, according to the number of all the cities of the Philistines belonging to the 5 lords, both of fenced cities and of country villages, even unto the great stone of Abel, wherein they set down the ark of Yahovah, which stone remains unto this day in the field of Joshua the Beth Shemite. Great stone of Abel. Anybody familiar with my comments on this in the Gen 4 study? For those of you who are, you remember that I said that I believed Abel did his offering that was accepted by fire from heaven upon a great stone on top of a hill or mountain? That's my second reason as to why I bring up the cattle going up the highway towards the great stone of Hechbo, of Abel, where they did the sacrifices, which makes me wonder if it can be identified. I spent some time trying to identify the great stone of Abel, and I couldn't do it. I haven't been able to do it yet. I've tried to see if anybody else claimed it. I was really hoping to see if there would be indications of burnt sacrifices upon it. But I have yet to see any claims, even ones that are not convincing. I've yet to see convincing or unconvincing claims of identifying the great stone of Abel. Truthfully, I believe most haven't even put thought into the great stone of Abel, let alone if that connects to the Abel from Genesis 4. He smote the men of Beth Shemesh. Look at this, you guys. They rejoice at the sight of the ark. They sacrificed upon the stone. And Yah's response was that he smote the men of Beth Shemesh. Why? Because they had looked into the ark of Yahovah. Even he smote the people 50,000 and 70 men. 50,070. And the people lamented because Yahovah had smitten many people with a great slaughter. 50,000. So first they lost 4,000 in the first battle. They go get their jack in the box in their mind and heart, that is. Ark of the Covenant was not a jack in the box, but in their mind and their heart it was. They pull it out. They do their cranking. Yah does not honor it because he sees their minds and their hearts. Allows it to be stolen, possibly by Goliath. And they lose 30,000. Now, when they're not fighting the Philistines and they're rejoicing at the return of their jack-in-the-box and their mind and their heart, 50,000. Because they're not honoring the situation. They looked into it, which they knew they weren't supposed to do. And it's easy to think that in their flesh they might have been thinking, well, let's see if they took anything out of it, right? Because there would have been stuff in the ark. Did the Philistines take stuff out of it? But the thing is like, my problem with this is the same problem I have with churches that have security cameras and lock their doors. I understand it, but I do not believe it is right, okay? Looking into the ark is saying that you are trying to figure for yourself if something needs to be solved, what was wrong. But that's not really your concern. You have the ark because Yah told you to have the ark. So if something was taken out of it, then Yah allowed that to happen. This is Yah's business. You know you're not supposed to look into it. Just like putting security cameras in front of a church and locking the doors at night. Yes, somebody could break in. Somebody could destroy things. Somebody could steal things. All the more reason as to why you should have a representative there at all times like they used to. So if somebody comes to your church as like a city of refuge type of situation for their own, not like biblical city refuge where, they're about to be put on trial for killing somebody, but rather they're having some kind of midlife crisis, some kind of situation. How many of you, live or otherwise, have had a situation in your life where you needed to get away and you were between making bad decisions, but you couldn't be home for whatever reason you didn't want to be or couldn't be, and you were trying to think of where to go? How many of you have thought some things that you shouldn't have thought, or even went to some places you shouldn't have went to, because the option, the possibility, the idea that I could go to a church and just go in and sit in the pew and pray and think is not even something that comes to mind, because it's not something that's done anymore, because the doors are locked, nobody's there, and they have security cameras. Yes, somebody could break in and steal things, but again, wouldn't that be either allowed or not allowed by Yah? Where's the trust? I used to do sermons about this. I used to call it pastors and churches back in 2014, 2015 for locking their doors and having security cameras. And they looked at me like I was a nutso. And I understood why they thought I was a nutso for it. But I'm sitting there going, you're supposed to be the place that represents a house of the worship of God, where you can help people who are in times of trouble. How often are times in trouble are in the middle of the night? How often are times in trouble not 9 to 11 a.m. Sunday morning? Back in the day, someone lived in the church. They might be cranky that you woke them up and the doors might be locked, but you bang on it enough, they'll come and answer the door and say, what is it? What happened to that? Man, I would love to live in a church and be called to be that person. So Yah smites 50,070 men of Israel because they looked into the ark. It shows a lack of honoring. It shows a lack of comprehending the glory of Yah. And the people lamented because Yah had smitten many people with a great slaughter. And the men of Beth Shemesh said, who is able to stand before the holy Yahovah Elohim? To whom shall he go up from us? Get rid of this thing. So see, now it went from it to he. And they sent messengers into the inhabitants of Kirjath-jearim, right? Saying, the Philistines have brought again the ark of the Yahovah. Come down and fetch it up to you. Get this thing out of here. Just like the cities of the Philistines. The ark comes in, they rejoice. Heck, it didn't even kill them on the first day, right? Yah didn't smite them until the next morning. But the Israelites, they get killed the first night. And their response is just like the Philistines. Get this box out of here. But it's not the box. And the men came and fetched the ark of Yahovah and brought it to the house of Abinadab in the hill, and sanctified Eleazar his son to keep the ark of Yahovah. And it came to pass while the ark was there that the time was long, for it was 20 years. And all the house of Israel lamented after Yahovah. And then it goes into Samuel judging Israel into chapter 7. I'm going to leave that for next video. If it's next week or whatever, we'll see. Man, we sped right through that. Huh? I guess that's what happens when I don't make a bunch of extra notes. So one of the things I didn't mention last video, because I didn't want to take too long to mention it, but since we have a little bit of time right now, for anybody who's curious, Samuel was a Levite. So last week I said I didn't want to get into it because it's something that's debated by some. But if you look at the very first verse of 1 Samuel 1, it talks about Elkanah, the son of Jehoram, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephrathite, right? So they say, oh, he was from tribe Ephraim. How is it then that Samuel was allowed to be in the temple doing temple work? He wasn't of the tribe of Ephraim. He was a Levite. And we see this in, what is it, 2 Chronicles 6? First or 2 Chronicles 6? Let's go to 2 Chronicles 6. Well, maybe it's not that. Okay, let's try 1 Chronicles 6. I'm pretty sure. Yep, 1 Chronicles 6. Descendants of Levi, right? And it's through the family of Kohath, I believe, which is funny because that's where you get your family of Korah, right? So I think that's kind of interesting. Yeah, Gershom, Kohath, Merari, right? Those are the three from. And you go down. Yeah, Elkanah. So First Chronicles 6:26. This is that same Elkanah, right? And it talks about Samuel in verse 28, where we get to see his two sons' names that we're going to see referenced later on in 1 Samuel, but without the names. Vashni and Abiah. That's the names that were given in 1 Chronicles 6. So Samuel was a Levite. This is why, but yes, Ephrathah was a place, right? So he would have been living probably amongst the tribe of Ephraim. See, I think a lot of people, they see this verse, and especially your churchianity types and your pastors and stuff will say, oh, he was from Ephraim or whatever, because they're not studying Torah, right? Because they've already been told it's done away with, and they're not going to think about Torah things Torah away. We are just in. Oh, that is so cool, MB. That's pretty tight. MB said he was in 1 Chronicles 6 earlier today. That is pretty cool. I love when Yah does that stuff. The Levites were placed throughout the tribes so that they all had priests, right? And then they were given something like, what was that, like 42, 48 cities? And then of those, they had 6 refugee cities. But the Levites were dispersed throughout. The priests were dispersed throughout for many reasons. So as it seems to me, clearly, as it seems to me, I mean, I don't see why there's such a debate on this. But it seems to me that Samuel would have came from Elkanah, from the family of Levites that would have been representing the Levites amongst the tribe of Ephraim. So I just wanted to get that in there because as we go throughout 1 Samuel, this would explain how he can be a priest, a prophet, a judge, and a Nazirite. Not claiming that all Nazirites are Levites, but it does seem to be more often the case than not. But okay, well, that's all I wanted to get through tonight. We really kind of sped through those. Main takeaways: Goliath maybe stole the ark, but more importantly, is there something in your walk that you're treating like the Israelites treated the ark here in this battle? And thus, Yah had to take it away from them. They had set it up in their hearts and their minds as an idol, so Yah had to debase that image in their minds and their heart. But he wasn't. The ark itself wasn't an idol. It's how they treated it. So he didn't have the ark destroyed. He needed it to be taken away and brought back. That was part of his way, as it seems to me, his way of showing them, you're treating this as an idol. You didn't come to me. I didn't tell you to bring this out. What makes you think you bring this out that you're going to win the battle? I never told you that. That's true. Samuel would have been adopted by Eli. But he was given as tribute, which is not the same thing as adoption. But that's a good point to bring up, though. The whole adoption would be another, not loophole, but a way within Torah. But I definitely believe he was a Levite. As we can see right here in 1 Chronicles 6, I mean, it seems very clearly to me to be saying Elkanah was of Levi through Kohath. And I mentioned Samuel like 2 verses down after Elkanah. Priest, prophet, judge, and I would argue Nazirite. It's kind of funny. I had a conversation with Chedrick a couple of years ago, and we were talking about random things, and he was like mentioning random things, and like, is there any place in the Bible? And I think he was trying to test me, but we were joking around about how there's so much stuff in the Bible that, to outright say something's not in the Bible without looking first is really silly and foolish because almost everything is in there, right? And Chedrick had said something like, are there even mice in the Bible? And I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, you got the golden mice. I still remember the conversation. We were standing next to his fridge, and I said, the golden mice. And he was like, what are you talking about? I was like, 1 Samuel. I love 1 Samuel, so of course it comes to my mind, But all right, well, anyways, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to sit here and chit-chat for no reason, just because I'm all happy that I sped through this study. Hopefully this didn't seem, as Jeff would say, happy mealish to you all. But there was some heaviness to be considering, right? And there's a lot of building stones here to be thinking about, right? So you can compare it to Exodus. You have the judgment of deities, right? You have plagues with seemingly possibly the same plague of the boils and bubonic plague, right? You also have the return with treasure. Now, see, some of you guys were picking out some of my points before I mentioned them, and I was like, oh, I wanted to get there. But I don't think anybody brought that up yet. When the ark returned, it returned back with gold, just like the Israelites when they left Egypt, which was actually referenced in a couple verses in here, right? And you've got the advisors of the kings saying, let it go, let it go. Don't harden your heart. Oh, yeah, that's an interesting theory. I'm not saying for sure it is Goliath, but I'm leaning towards it being that it was. I think it is very likely. If you look at the timing, and I mean, the timing really was a good clue for me. All right. Anyways, I'm gonna let you all go. Before I end out, we are looking at and considering the possibility of a Sukkot gathering. So, not officially stating, hypothetically, I need to start knowing and seeing, because we're looking at places, and it's kind of funny because it's hard to choose a location when you don't have an idea of how many people, but it's hard to have an idea of how many people if you don't already have a location to say we're doing this. Because without the location to get the people, it's hard to tell them how much it's going to cost, where it's going to be, how many days, if there's going to be cabins, things like that. But then it's kind of hard to book a place, So anyways, that's what we're looking at. So one of the things right now is I'd like to see if there's interest and how much interest, because one of the locations I'm looking at has something like 40 cabins in one little spot. And those are real basic, simple cabins, heating, AC, couple beds. I think it's got a fridge. These cabins aren't about luxury. And, if you were to get that cabin, I would expect you wouldn't be about luxury. But if we were to be able to block off all 40, there's like 6 of them that are pet friendly and like 2 or 3 that are handicap accessible. I don't know if they've got ramps for wheelchairs or what that means, but but anyways, that's 40 that are right next to each other. The whole area with trails and waterfalls and there's all kinds of, if we get a lot of people to agree on it, and if I'm able to talk with them and actually block off a set of like a week, they have activities that you've got like 4-wheeling and zip lining and rock climbing and kayaking, all kinds of crazy stuff. There's no yurts at this location that I'm aware of. But outside of those 40 cabins, if we were to get enough people, there are bigger other cabins that are close, and it's within the same area. It's just not right there where you wake up, come outside, and there's your cabin right next to you. But those other bigger cabins are pricey. So I would expect that people would either be having bigger families, or maybe multiple people are going in on a cabin like that, unless you've got money, or you'd be only coming for a few days, because the cost of those cabins are tremendously more expensive than the small basic ones. But anyways, that's what I'm looking at right now. 8 days of Utah. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to go to Utah. By the time I get there, I'd have to turn back around. I'd miss my vacation days would literally be spent traveling there and back. So I'm not going to be able to do that. But anyways, well, let's see. I'm not giving a link because I haven't solidified anything. at all. I've emailed them, I've called them, they've called me back. I've looked at things. I think it's going to be difficult to block off the entire thing unless we throw down money on the entire thing. And that's going to be expensive. And it's going to be hard to do that if I don't know if people are going to fill up. So as to say, I don't want to pay for 40 cabins and then have 20 cabins empty that I paid out of pocket for, or a sponsor paid out of pocket for, because I don't even know if I have enough money for all that, because I don't know how much they're going to charge for the idea of blocking off the whole thing. So I'm looking into it. It's a hypothetical right now, but I really want to do a Sukkot gathering. And every gathering I looked at was closed off or too far, or I don't know anybody, and I don't want to travel states away and be the uncomfortable third wheel for Sukkot. So I'm trying to get an Ohio gathering. Yeah, it's in Ohio. And I'm talking to Take on the World peoples and things like this. I'm not trying to do this all on my own. But this is what we're looking at. Right now we're considering the first couple weeks of Ohio. I would lean more towards the first week rather than the second. But there are some reasons why it might be the second week. But we're looking at the first half of Ohio. And most locations I'm looking at are very southern Ohio. We have had somebody offer a southern Indiana location, but that would be a lot smaller of a gathering. And I think a lot of people would have to either have RVs with their own generator because there's no hookups, or they would have to get hotel miles out. And that gathering would have a lot of pros, but it would be more small and intimate and things like that. So right now I'm trying to see if we can get a big one in case that we get enough people. But this is something I need to be pumping out now to see if we can get enough people, because to plan something like this, like we're already late in the game. So if you are possibly up for that, I need to be seeing it. I need to be seeing it in the comments so that Take on the World can see it. If you're on Facebook, I need to be. We need to be seeing this interest, because if there's not enough generated interest, then a lot of the people that I'm talking to try to get things ready are probably going to put their chips on the table. A registration page, yeah, but again, that's difficult without having the location. And it's difficult to pick a location unless you know if there's people. So right now it's one of those really funny situations, because like a lot of these locations, they're not going to let me ask them to block off a week and then not give them money and not say that I'm in. They want down payments, and I'm talking thousands of dollars. But if I've got a lot of people, then we can front money. We can figure out how to front the money. That's the next issue. If we've got enough people that not only want to go, but will actually go. Because that's another thing too. We get people that say they want to go or they'll go to things and then they don't show, which I understand life gets in the way, but when you're blocking off 40 plus cabins, you really can't have the majority not show. Although we probably would have a situation where you'd end up having to pay for your cabin before you come out. So, but anyways, I just want to throw that out there. That is something that I am working on behind the scenes. That is something I've been pushing for like 5 years for Take on the World to be involved in a Sukkot thing. So I'm really trying to push that. If you come to the airport, Mrs. Vader, we'll have somebody go get you. That's not a problem. I can almost guarantee you that right now. If we have, and I really want to do an Ohio Sukkot so badly that if I can't get a Take on the World one, we might do a Draw Nigh to the Creator, real small Sukkot. But I really want to do a Sukkot, you guys. Fellowship Sukkot. Yeah, we can send vans. We can send buses. I've got a huge van, not one of those big vans, but I've got a van, and it can fit people. You know, we multiple vehicles. Issue isn't getting you to the site. It's an issue of if you come to Ohio and if you're going to be able to come and if you want to come and things like that. You get here, we'll help you get to the site. That's not a problem. But all right, anyways, I just want to throw that out there. So something to think about, something to pray about, something to consider. Let us know if you're interested. Let us know if you're more than interested. We need to know those things. Okay, so much love for you all. Are there any questions or concerns about this study? I saw some already that we had talked about in the chat. Is there any that I missed or anything? Last chance. That's cool, MB. I understand you got your your people's traditions. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. All right. I scrolled up to the chat to try to catch up on any things that I might have missed. I'm not seeing anybody have any questions or concerns or anything like that. So we are going to be done for the night. Okay. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Hope y'all blessed you. What you do is make a Google Doc where people who are interested can register. Then they can. Yeah. Well, see, I'm not a very organized individual. I'm really not. Sweaty Ian t-shirt giveaway. See, you say things like that, and then people aren't going to want the shirts, Patricia. But okay, that's not a bad idea though. You get a Google Doc and get people to register. There's also like you've got your Facebook event pages, and it'll say yes, no, maybe, interested, things like that. There's ways of doing things like that too. That's not a bad idea. We should probably actually get on that. I'll get the giveaways out. My wife is gonna have to take them to the post office while I work because everything's only open when I work. But once I get the giveaways out this week, that'll probably be the next step, is trying to see how much interest we have generated, who can definitely say they'll come, and things like that. Because if we're looking at a small thing, cool. If we're looking at a big thing, cool. But we need to have an idea. Guys, trails, waterfalls. I mean, and this, it's got multiple trails, multiple waterfalls. It is a really cool location, if we can get it. But okay, hey Donna, Shabbat Shalom. You just getting in now? I'm just about to get off. All right, I gotta get with all you guys. But if you go back, I show the t-shirts and things like that. So that everybody can see the shirts, so you can see which ones were the options. Because I know we were talking about shirts, so you can see the image. Okay, all right. For real, letting you guys go this time. May God bless you and guide you and keep you according to his will. May his face shine upon you, and may he give you his shalom as he sees fit. So be it, and so be it.
Yeah. He's alive. It's really just that simple, man. Draw nigh to God, man. Yeah. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you.